I didn't even get a hi, no greeting, no apology, not even the decency of my name, just a subject line update funds moved. And then a single sentence sitting in the body like a quiet betrayal: I've transferred your inheritance into my private account. It's better this way. Attached beneath it a photo. Blurry, smug, damning. Her on a balcony somewhere, warm wine in one hand, eyes lit with sunset. And beside her, the man who was not me. A beard that looked intentional. One of those beards men grow to look wise when they've long since forgotten how to be faithful. His hand rested loosely on her shoulder, the kind of touch that says, I've been here for a while. And her smile, wide, easy, unguarded. The kind of smile that doesn't happen by accident. The kind of smile I hadn't seen since the early years. Not since we danced barefoot in the kitchen under broken fairy lights. Not since our plans felt like shared blueprints, not separate exits. Not since she looked at me and saw her future instead of her fallback. That night on that balcony, Claire didn't just look happy. She looked free. And the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was how clearly she'd stopped pretending it wasn't one. Before I take you further, I want to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you've ever had your heart stepped over with a smile, hit like so I know I'm not the only one. Subscribe, because when Claire finds out what I'd already done, her expression changes. And you won't want to miss that moment. Now back to the moment it all cracked. I was still in the shirt I'd worn to a client meeting that morning. Still in the home office we'd designed together. The same built-in shelves we measured by hand. The same reclaimed oak desk we argued about until she said it gave the room character. The room felt colder that night, lit only by the screen casting pale shadows across a wall that had once displayed her framed wellness certificates and my favorite architectural sketches side by side. A balance, a lie. Claire hadn't called. No warning. No, we need to talk. Just silence and then digital theft. And she didn't take our money. She took what was never hers. An inheritance. A legacy. A second chance wrapped in grief and earned in graveyard shifts. The gift Joanna left behind. Joanna wasn't really my aunt. She was more than that. A stand-in mother guardian and one-woman rescue team who showed up when life had gutted mine completely. I was 15. My parents died in a winter car wreck. And Joanna, a cardiac nurse with too little time and too much compassion, took me in without flinching. She gave me roof food purpose. Worked nights so I could finish school. Slept in her car between shifts. Wrote my FAFSA by hand. Cheered when I got my scholarship. And when cancer took her last year, she left me a letter and a fund. The letter read, build something that lasts longer than pain. And in the trust, she set up $612,000. Quiet, powerful, and intended only for me. Not for cars, not for vacations, not for shared ledgers. Claire knew all of that. She was at the funeral. She held my hand at the burial. She nodded as I read the letter aloud at the reception. She even said, your aunt was remarkable. You're lucky to have had her. I was. And yet Claire looked at that legacy and saw an opportunity. Like my grief was a loophole. Like my survival was a figure she could quietly move to her benefit. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't even forward the email to my lawyer, not yet. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and poured a glass of water. Because when your heart's already been broken in slow motion over years, you don't panic. You prepare. I stared out the back doors into the yard we'd once reshaped together. She chose the hydrangeas. I laid the stone path. I remember her saying she wanted the walkway to curve gently like it was always meant to bend that way. And standing there, I finally saw it. Every curve in our marriage had always tilted toward her comfort, her ambition, her exit. Claire didn't know what she never bothered to ask was that I had already seen the storm coming. The distance, the hesitations, the sudden retreats to wellness weekends that stretched longer each time, the phone calls she took out of earshot, the laughter that felt unfamiliar like it belonged to a version of her I no longer had access to, the way she asked about my accounts, not lovingly, but surgically. Let's simplify, she said once, not looking up from her tea. All these passwords and logins, they're just clutter. She said it like she was organizing a drawer, but I heard the blade beneath the words, and I didn't ignore it. I adapted. 3 months before her email arrived, I made a quiet drive to Atlanta to meet with Rita Martinez, Joanna's estate lawyer, and one of the few people I knew who had both a spine and a soul. She offered me coffee, asked if I'd been sleeping okay, then listened carefully as I laid it out without drama or self-pity. My wife's asking about the inheritance, not out of concern. She's interested. Too interested. Rita tapped her pen twice against the legal pad, then said, "Your aunt was wise to set up an irrevocable trust. Even you can't just move that money on a whim, which means she sure as hell can't. But if she tries, we'll know. We activated a monitoring system. Every login attempt, every access request, every fingerprint Claire left we'd catch. Quietly, legally, with timestamps and IP logs. I didn't warn her. I let her believe she was the smartest person in the room. The same week I checked our shared cloud folder, the one labeled House Renovation Ideas. It was supposed to hold paint colors, floor plans, dream countertops we'd never afford. Instead, I found a hidden subfolder. Inside were screenshots of my investment accounts, copies of monthly statements, spreadsheets calculating potential withdrawal fees, even a note titled Estimated Total After Transfer, minus 20%. And the name of the folder, Exit Strategy, not Plan B, not What If. No, this was her plan. She was just waiting for the right timing to execute. She forgot to delete the file. Or maybe she didn't think she had to. I saved a copy, sent it to Rita, and said nothing. When Claire packed for her next retreat, she kissed me on the cheek. Light, distant, the way a niece might greet an uncle. "This one might go longer than usual," she said. "I need space." I smiled. I said, "Take all the time you need." Then I helped her load the bags into the back of the Volvo, watched her drive off with her sunglasses on and her music playing. And then I walked inside, opened a folder labeled Evidence, and clicked the first file. Because this time the betrayal wasn't romantic, it was transactional. And in the real world, love fades. But fraud leaves fingerprints. And I had every single one of hers. They say betrayal doesn't happen overnight. And they're right, it starts quietly. Like a room you've been sitting in for years, slowly losing heat, and you don't notice until one day you can see your breath in the air. That's what living with Claire became. Cold, gradual, and silent. I remember the exact moment I realized I was no longer her partner, but her placeholder. It was a Thursday. We'd both come home late. I had just wrapped a project with a difficult client, and she was back from one of her weekend sound bath retreats. She walked through the door smelling like eucalyptus and lemon oil. Her shoes barely made a sound, like even her footsteps didn't want to disturb the illusion we were still married. I said, "You're home." She nodded. "That's it. Not even a hey." And I remember standing in the kitchen with a bottle of Malbec I'd saved for us, her favorite back when we used to toast small victories. But she walked right past me, mumbling something about needing a shower. And as the water ran upstairs, I just stood there holding 2 glasses. That was the first time I didn't follow her. Didn't ask how the retreat was. Didn't ask who went with her. Because deep down, I already knew the answer. It wasn't about wellness. It was about distance. And she'd been growing it like a garden. In the early years, Claire was warmth. She was chaos wrapped in charm. The kind of woman who laughed mid-sentence, trailed her fingers across maps, and made plans that didn't always make sense but always sounded like adventures. She was a wellness coach who taught people how to breathe through their trauma. I was an architect trying to build things that wouldn't collapse when pressure came. We met at a community seminar. She was hosting a mindfulness talk, and I only showed up because Joanna had begged me to get out of the house. I swear Joanna had said, "If you don't let the past breathe, it'll suffocate your future." Claire had worn a navy blue scarf and talked about energy like it was a living thing. I didn't believe in half of what she said, but I believed in the way she looked at me. Back then, she looked at me like I was something rare, like a man who wasn't trying to fix her but to understand her. We used to lie on the floor and trace dreams into the ceiling. She wanted to open a wellness center in Asheville. I wanted to design homes that felt like sanctuaries. For a while, it worked. We were broke but aligned. She lit candles. I paid the gas bill late. She meditated. I worked weekends. But somewhere along the line, love turned into logistics. The shifts were small at first. She stopped asking how my day went, stopped lighting candles, stopped telling me when she cried. I asked once gently if something was wrong. She smiled a tight professional smile she normally reserved for clients and said, "You've just been so busy lately. I didn't want to add more to your plate." and I almost believed her. But the truth was she wasn't trying to spare my plate. She was already eating somewhere else. I don't tell you this to make you pity me. Don't hit like if you think I'm some kind of victim. This isn't about pity. This is about patterns. And if you've ever looked across a dinner table and realized the person chewing beside you hasn't really spoken to you in months, you know what I mean. You start noticing absences in the presence, like the way Claire started keeping her phone face down, the way she answered calls with "hey there" instead of "hi," the way she started saying "I" instead of "we." I once asked her, half joking, "Do you still think about Asheville?" She blinked slowly, then said, "Maybe one day, on my own." That "on my own" landed like a stone in the chest, and I nodded like it didn't crack something inside me. I'd be lying if I said I didn't try. I booked us a cabin in the Blue Ridge, just 3 days, no Wi-Fi, just the two of us. She came, but she never arrived. Her body was there, but her mind was elsewhere, checking her nails, scrolling in the bathroom, claiming headaches that never seemed to need Advil. The last night I made a fire, tried to recreate that warm glow magic from our first New Year's together. I poured wine, put on that Van Morrison record she used to love, and said, "Claire, are you still here with me?" She looked at me, no blinking, no flinching, and she said, "I'm trying, but I think we want different lives now." Not different things. Different lives, that's not a crack. That's a demolition notice. So, no, I wasn't surprised by her email. Not really. What surprised me was how easy it was for her, how casual she sounded. Like moving my inheritance into her private account was just a task she ticked off between a spa appointment and a deep tissue massage. No shame, no hesitation, no delay. But what she didn't know was that every move she made had already been documented, logged, tied to her device. Thanks to Rita, I had a digital paper trail long before Claire thought to hit transfer. And here's the thing most people don't understand. It's not the dramatic betrayal that wounds you most. It's the quiet efficiency of it. The way someone can rehearse your erasure while kissing you good morning. The way they can smile in family photos while building their exit behind the scenes. That kind of betrayal isn't loud. It's meticulous. I know some of you watching this right now, somewhere in Kansas or Kentucky or California, you're nodding. Because you've felt it too. That shift in a long marriage. The one where affection turns into performance. Where you become a prop in your own home. Tell me in the comments, was there a moment when you knew, not suspected, not feared, but knew? For me, it wasn't the email. It was the moment I realized I no longer recognized her voice when she laughed. But here's the part I want you to remember. The world doesn't stop when someone betrays you. The rent still needs paying. The coffee still brews. The dog still needs a walk. And so the morning after Claire's email, I walked the dog. I returned a client call, and I made an appointment with Rita, because pain doesn't excuse passivity, and revenge done right doesn't look like rage, it looks like order. And order was what I had been quietly building while Claire thought I was too tired to notice. There's a moment in every con where the con artist thinks they've won. It's always the same expression, relaxed shoulders and untucked grin, a false sense of victory dancing just behind the eyes. Claire hit that moment 3 days after she sent the email. She returned from her retreat like nothing happened. Not a trace of guilt, not a single apology, just a faint tan, a new silk scarf, and a soft, almost playful tone when she asked, "Did you water the plants?" as if she hadn't siphoned $612,000 from under my nose. I watched her float through the kitchen in those linen pants she only wore when she felt powerful. She opened the fridge, poured herself almond milk, and said she'd be meeting with her financial wellness coach later that week. That's when I knew she hadn't yet realized what I'd done. See, I'd made one critical change 2 months prior, something she never thought to check. That inheritance. It wasn't in our joint account anymore. Hadn't been for weeks. I'd moved it into a revocable living trust under my name only, filed and verified, legally separate from marital assets thanks to advice from Rita, my longtime financial advisor, and the only person who knew the full picture. But Claire, in her confidence, had still tried to move funds from the joint account, assuming the trust hadn't been finalized. She thought the transaction had gone through. It hadn't. All she had done was attempt to move money that no longer belonged to the account she accessed. She'd pulled a rope thinking she'd winch up gold and ended up yanking down the curtain on herself, and she wouldn't find out until the paperwork caught up with her. That morning I sat across from her at breakfast. She was scrolling Zillow on her iPad, showing me pictures of future getaways we could invest in. Maybe something in Costa Rica, she said almost sweetly. Or Tulum. You've always said you wanted to retire somewhere warm. That part was true. I had said that. But never with her. She didn't notice I hadn't responded. Didn't look up once. Because here's what I've learned. When someone is plotting your future without your voice in it, they're really planning a life that doesn't include you. They're just softening the exit for themselves. Later that day I went to the garage. There, under a dusty drop cloth, was the old chest my aunt had given me. The one that held the handwritten letters, her nurse's pin, and the sealed envelope she left me in her will. Inside that envelope was a single line: use this gift to protect who you are, not who you thought they were. I kept that note. I read it every time I felt the temptation to shout, to rage, to demand justice in the way movies teach us to. But I didn't. Because real revenge isn't cinematic. It's quiet. It's legal. It's clean. 2 weeks after Claire's return, the email came. Not from her. From her lawyer. A preliminary proposal for the division of assets. They were assuming we were headed for an amicable separation. She was seeking full ownership of our shared condo, a percentage of my pension, and a lump sum payout from what she referred to as our inheritance. I read the document twice. Then I poured myself a glass of water, not wine water, because clarity matters more than comfort. And I drafted my reply. But not to her, to my lawyer. Let me pause here and ask you watching this. Have you ever been underestimated so completely that it became your greatest weapon? That was me. Claire thought she knew everything about me, that I'd roll over, keep the peace, pay the price of her freedom with my silence. She'd forgotten who she married. I was never the loud man in the room. But I was the one who watched every detail, remembered every receipt, and built systems designed not to collapse. I didn't need to burn the house down. I just needed to pull out the blueprint she never knew existed. That weekend, Claire hosted a small gathering. Just 6 people, her wellness friends, all of them wearing white, sipping kombucha, discussing alignment and soul release. I stood in the kitchen refilling a tray of sparkling water when I overheard her say, "Yeah, the money's sorted. I mean, it's basically mine anyway. He'd never fight me on it." Laughter. Someone murmured, "You're lucky he's so passive." Another chuckled. Passive men make the best exits. I placed the tray down quietly and walked outside. I didn't confront her, didn't disrupt her evening. I simply texted my lawyer. "Let's proceed. Send everything first thing Monday." Then I walked down the street, sat on a bench facing the lake, and exhaled. That's when I realized her friends were laughing at a man who no longer existed. And soon, so would she. Monday came. Claire received the packet at 9:43 a.m., not from me. From a courier. Sealed. Legal. Precise. Inside documentation of the trust, the asset separation, and a copy of her unauthorized transfer request with timestamps, IP logs, and device data. All legal, all irrefutable, and a single note in my handwriting paper-clipped on top. The money isn't yours. It never was. But the mirror is. Take a long look. That afternoon she didn't speak to me, but I heard her. Behind the bedroom door, pacing, panicked calls, then silence. The kind of silence that only happens when someone sees themselves clearly for the first time. The thing about Claire is, she never liked silence. She filled every space with movement, yoga mats rolled out before sunrise, phone calls on speaker playlists named after moods she couldn't quite explain. But after the envelope arrived, the house went still. No more smoothies blending at 6 a.m., no more retreat leader Zooms in the living room. Just the soft shuffle of someone realizing the chessboard didn't look the way she thought it did. She didn't ask me about the documents, not at first. She played it cool, Claire always did. The first crack came 3 days later over breakfast. She sat across from me, stirring granola into her yogurt like she wasn't sweating inside. "I've been meaning to ask," she said casually, "why did the bank block my transfer? It flagged it as unauthorized. I was just moving our money." Her tone wasn't angry. It was inquisitive. Almost maternal. I looked at her spoon, paused midair, and I said just one thing. "It wasn't our money." She blinked. That was the first time I saw her confidence falter. You have to understand, Claire built her world on image, not substance, not roots, but impressions. She made everything look intentional, curated right down to the way she placed oranges in a bowl like it was a magazine shoot. So the idea that she'd made a move and miscalculated, it didn't compute. That afternoon, I heard her in the office making calls. Bank, lawyer, her financial wellness coach, whoever that really was. I knew the questions she'd be asking. Why was I locked out of the funds? Why didn't the transfer go through? Is there a way to reverse a trust? The answers were simple. No, because I planned for this, because I knew who you were before you admitted it. Flashback 1 year earlier. Claire came home from her book club lipstick too perfect for wine and words. She tossed her purse on the couch and said, "You know, if anything ever happened to you, I'd probably move to Costa Rica." It was offhand, a joke maybe, but the way she smiled when she said it, like she'd already tried the thought on. That night I called Rita, my financial advisor of over 15 years. "Let's start planning," I told her. She didn't ask why. She'd met Claire once. That was enough. Back to the present. Claire must have known by day 5 that the financial doors had closed, but she hadn't yet grasped the second blow. It came when she got a call from the non-profit board she'd just joined, a social wellness collective, she called it. They were informing her politely that her name had been removed from the upcoming gala sponsor list. Why? Because I'd pulled the $25,000 donation she claimed we gifted together. It wasn't hers to offer. I redirected the funds to a local nurse scholarship in my aunt's name. Claire called me furious. "You embarrassed me," she hissed. "Do you realize how that made me look?" I replied calmly. "Like someone who gives away what doesn't belong to them." The thing about people like Claire is they don't unravel all at once. They fray. Small threads. First, reputation, perception, ego. Then come the big ones. Finances control future. And she was fraying fast. She started doing that thing when she cleaned compulsively, reorganizing cabinets, deleting photos off her phone like she could delete consequence too. She called her sister twice in one day. Then her ex-colleague. Then a financial planner she hadn't spoken to in 4 years. And then when all else failed, she turned to me. "I made a mistake," she said softly, sitting beside me one night. She wasn't crying. She never cried. "I panicked. I thought we were growing apart, and I just wanted to secure something for myself." I nodded. "That's exactly what you did." Her face changed. She expected forgiveness, or a bargain. But I wasn't there to negotiate. I'd already made peace with her absence. To those of you still watching, maybe you think I was too calm, that I should have fought, raised my voice, slammed a door. But here's the truth. Claire wasn't the storm. She was the roof that slowly leaked. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was steady. It was years of being rewritten in her mind as the passive husband, the man she could outmaneuver, gaslight, and eventually discard like yesterday's version of herself. What she didn't count on was that I had quietly built a version of myself she never bothered to see. That Friday she packed a bag. Not all her things, just enough to suggest drama without finality. She left a note on the counter. "I need space to think. This isn't what I wanted." I read it once, folded it, and placed it in the box with all her others. The anniversary cards she wrote with half effort, the lists of joint goals that only she made, and the sticky note she once left that read, "Can you please Venmo my friend for brunch?" Even her requests came with a sense of entitlement. But now, the only thing she had left was time, and I wasn't giving her mine anymore. Claire didn't return that weekend. She stayed with a friend downtown, one of those women she used to call the spiritually toxic ones back when she still cared about image. Now she was the one in exile, and I could feel her scrambling. Monday morning, an envelope arrived at my doorstep. Certified mail, legal letterhead. Claire had hired a lawyer. The letter used words like commingled assets, marital property, and equitable distribution. In other words, she was trying to claw her way back into something she'd already tried to steal. She wanted a meeting. She wanted negotiation. She wanted, in her lawyer's words, what she's entitled to. So I did something that would have shocked Claire. I agreed. We met at a small law office on the edge of town, a firm I'd used before when updating my aunt's trust. Claire walked in wearing white. Of course she did. Hair straightened to precision, makeup subtle, but sculpted perfume so light you'd think she didn't wear any. But I knew that scent controlled intent. She didn't look at me at first, just sat down and crossed her legs like she was on a panel discussion. "Thank you for coming," her lawyer began. "We believe there's been a misunderstanding regarding the funds in question. Under California, marital property law assets acquired during marriage regardless of inheritance can be considered community property if I raised a hand calm but firm. My lawyer will speak to that," I said. And speak he did. Turns out Claire's assumptions had holes. Big ones. Yes, we lived in a community property state. Yes, assets can be considered shared if they are commingled. But my inheritance had been placed in a separate trust 2 years prior. Not just that the trust was legally structured to skip probate protected by a clause my aunt insisted on, for educational or legacy use only. My lawyer passed over the paperwork. Pages with dates, signatures, clear legal boundaries. The money Claire tried to take. It wasn't even in my name anymore. It was in the name of a foundation, under my aunt's name, with me as the lifetime trustee and a board that included 3 former nurses she trained in her final years. Claire's face tightened. "Wait, you're saying he doesn't even control it?" "Correct. I couldn't spend it on a sports car if I wanted to." But Claire couldn't touch a dime. Her plan to secure something for herself vaporized. And then came the second blow. The house. She thought the house was marital property, and technically it was, until I refinanced it in my name after she signed a quitclaim deed. She forgot about that. Signed it 3 years ago when we refinanced to get a better rate, and she was too distracted planning a yoga retreat to read the fine print. My lawyer slid over a copy of the signed deed. Claire went quiet. Not angry, not crying, just silent. Because in that moment, she understood the home, the money, the future she assumed was hers to split, wasn't. But I didn't stop there. I handed her an envelope. Inside a copy of an email she sent to her lover while on that retreat. "Once it clears, we'll be set. I'll just play dumb if he notices he never checks the accounts anyway." Claire looked up sharply. "How did you get that?" I looked at her lawyer. He did too. And in that moment the air in the room changed. Because now this wasn't just a divorce. It was intent to defraud. And the man she thought was passive, naive, emotionally clueless had receipts. To those of you watching, here's something I've learned. Betrayal isn't always about the affair. It's about being erased. It's about someone you once loved rewriting the narrative of your life without you. Claire didn't just cheat with a man. She cheated with the idea that she deserved more than she earned and less than she promised. And when she realized I wasn't her fool, her mask slipped. Outside the law office, she finally spoke. "I didn't think you'd fight back." I nodded slowly. "I didn't. I planned ahead." She scoffed bitter. "I gave you years of my life, and you tried to take the rest." She walked to her car, still in white. But this time, she looked small in it, like a piece on a board she didn't know how to play anymore. I didn't watch her drive away. I turned and walked the other direction. Because you don't need to chase closure when the truth already beat you to the finish line. You know the kind of man who always has perfect teeth in every photo. Tanned linen shirts, drinks his coffee black, but orders it like a performance. That was Daniel Claire's retreat soulmate. The man in the blurry balcony photo. The man she left everything for. Except what she didn't know, what he didn't know, is that Daniel had made the same mistake she had. He underestimated the quiet man in the corner. After the legal meeting, Claire went dark for 2 weeks. No texts, no emails. But Daniel reached out. He wasn't supposed to have my email, but I'd seen his name pop up before on the shared iCloud. Claire never turned off syncing. And there it was. He's not going to let this go, is he? What do we do if the trust thing is real? I thought you said he never checked accounts. And then something that caught my attention. The lawyer I know said if it's fraud, we both might be on the hook. Your name was used to transfer funds, remember that line? That was gold. Because that meant Daniel had knowingly participated in the transfer of funds from the joint account, which meant he wasn't just Claire's partner in crime, he was her accomplice. So I did something simple. I printed out the email, just that one line, and forwarded it to my lawyer along with the full iCloud trail. We didn't press charges, not yet. Instead, we sent a notification of potential legal exposure to both Claire and Daniel. 1 certified letter, 2 signatures required. Claire called me that night. Her voice was different. Gone was the calm, the cold righteousness. Now it was edged with panic. You're dragging him into this. You dragged him into it. I'm just clarifying the consequences. He didn't do anything. You used his name to authorize the transfer. He sent the approval. Silence. And then more quiet rage than words. You're doing this to punish me. No. I'm doing this to protect what matters. The rest is just accountability. That's when Daniel called. Yes, he called. Voice slick, trying to play nice. Hey, listen, man. I think there's been some misunderstanding. I didn't mean to get between anything, Claire said. Everything was above board. I let him speak. He stumbled through a poorly rehearsed explanation about how he thought it was her money and that he was just trying to help her transition into a new life. When he finished, I asked one question. Would you be willing to put that in writing for the court? He hung up. And here's where the real turn happened. Claire, cornered and bleeding trust from both sides, tried to broker a truce. She proposed a quiet settlement. No lawyers, no press, no one loses face. But face was never what I cared about. It was the principle. The legacy of a woman who worked herself to the bone to give me a future. And the woman I married tried to turn that into leverage. No, she could keep her new man, her crystals, her retreats. But she wasn't taking my dignity with her. A week later, Daniel was served, not by me, by his ex-wife. Turns out Daniel hadn't finalized his own divorce. In fact, the money Claire thought he had frozen in assets under his ex-wife's legal claim. Claire had gone all in on a man with less than nothing. They say karma doesn't knock. It rings the bell and waits on the porch. Now here's the twist. Claire never expected that photo she sent, the one from the balcony. I'd had it printed, framed, and I mailed it back to her, with one line written on the back. Thank you. You gave me everything I needed, because without that betrayal, I would have never woken up. To those of you still watching, this isn't just about lost money. This is about reclaiming your clarity, your quiet power, your right to not be erased. There's a myth that older men get weaker with age, but I've learned something else. We don't get weaker. We just get quieter. And the quiet ones, we're the ones you should never underestimate. I never meant to involve my aunt, not directly. She had passed 2 years earlier, and I had spent months afterwards settling her affairs quietly, privately, the way she would have wanted. She wasn't a woman of many words, but she kept journals, letters. One in particular I hadn't opened until recently. It had been tucked inside a manila envelope with my name written in her tidy cursive, for when you finally see people clearly. I read it the week after Claire left, and in that letter was not just love, not just advice, but instruction. My aunt, God bless her, had always known Claire was ambitious. She never accused, never interfered, but she watched. In her will, she left me the inheritance in trust, but also authorized a secondary letter to be sent to any legal party attempting to access the trust through deception. She wrote it herself. It was blunt, cold, devastating in its precision. I had that letter notarized and mailed by certified delivery to Claire's lawyer. Claire didn't see it coming, not just because of what it said, but because of who signed it. It was co-signed by my aunt and my aunt's attorney, someone who knew the trust inside and out. And in it, a single paragraph stood out. Any attempt to seize this trust via marriage coercion or bad faith will trigger legal protection mechanisms under Section 38 of the trust agreement. You are not entitled. You were never entitled. And any further action will be seen as direct harm to the beneficiary. That was the day Claire stopped bluffing. She didn't call. She didn't write. But 2 days later, her attorney formally withdrew representation. She was alone now. Around the same time, I got a phone call I hadn't expected. It was from Claire's sister, Rebecca. We hadn't spoken in years. She'd always been the more grounded one in the family. A teacher. Lived in Portland. Can we talk, she asked. Not about Claire. About you. I hesitated, then said yes. Rebecca flew in that weekend. We met at a diner just outside of town. She slid a small package across the table. Brown paper, no label. I found this at my parents' house. Claire dropped it off years ago and never mentioned it. I think you should read it. Inside were handwritten pages. Claire's journals. Not the spiritual kind. Not I'm healing through moonlight and essential oils entries. No. These were calculations, dates, amounts. Notes like, If I can get him to sell before next spring, I can move half without alert. Daniel says the house is undervalued. Need appraisal after the separation. Should suggest couples therapy, then initiate delay. That gives time to move funds. Rebecca looked ashamed. I didn't know, she said. I always thought she loved you. I'm sorry. I told her the truth. I think she did, in her own way. But somewhere along the line, she loved herself more. Those pages became evidence, not for trial, not for revenge, but for truth. Because the more I pieced it together, the more I saw this wasn't impulsive. It wasn't about Daniel. It wasn't even about love. It was about extraction. Claire had turned marriage into an investment, and when the dividends stopped being exciting, she sold the stock and tried to walk away with the payout. But what she didn't understand, I wasn't stock. I was the foundation. And she'd just tried to burn the house down from the inside. I kept the journals, didn't leak them, didn't threaten her. I let them exist, like an insurance policy, and a mirror. Weeks passed. I'd gone back to my routines, my morning coffee at the window, my Sunday hikes, my quiet nights with a book and silence for company. Then came the letter. Not from Claire, but from her mother. A short, trembling script on pink stationery. I don't know what she's done. I only know she's not the daughter I raised. You were good to her. I see that now. I hope you find peace. No return address. Just initials E.T. Claire had managed to alienate even the last branch of family willing to defend her. And so by the end of that month, no lawyers, no courtrooms, no screaming matches. Just me. With everything intact, my trust, my home, my dignity. And Claire. With a lover drowning in debt, a trail of betrayal she could no longer cover, and a mirror she no longer dared to look into. And to those still watching, don't underestimate the power of a man who's been quiet too long. Sometimes the most dangerous revenge is no revenge at all. It's simply truth walking into the room and turning on the lights. It always amazed me how quiet the world gets when someone loses control. After Claire's attorney withdrew after Rebecca delivered the journals, and after even her own mother wrote that trembling apology, I expected silence. And that's exactly what I got for 3 weeks, until an envelope arrived. Not from Claire, from a realtor's office. A formal notice, polished, intentional. Subject line: scheduled sale of joint property, final notice. My brow furrowed. There was only one property Claire and I technically co-owned, though the trust handled most of my other real estate, a cabin 2 hours north, nestled on a stretch of old forest land near Lake Hammond. It was more memory than asset. We'd bought it early in our marriage during the good years. Winters by the fire, board games, mornings where the lake mist looked like something sacred. Claire had stopped visiting after year 8, called it rustic and outdated. But I never stopped going, not once. And now apparently she was trying to auction it off. I called the number on the notice, asked for the agent. Polite woman. Sounded young. Mr. Brooks, she said, the co-owner has authorized an expedited auction. We were under the impression you'd agreed to sell. I haven't, I said. Silence on her end. Oh, she replied finally. She provided a signed consent. Send me a copy. 2 hours later, I received it. It was my signature. Sort of. Digitized. Forged. The angle of the L in Leon was wrong. The S in Samuel looked traced. Claire had forged my consent to sell the last thing left that held meaning. I didn't get angry, didn't storm over. I drove to the cabin instead, took the back roads, stopped at the old bakery on the way. Got the same coffee I always did. And when I arrived at the cabin, the air smelled like pine and earth and history. Everything was still there. The canoe we never used, the book with her name scribbled in the margins, the key under the third stone by the steps. But something had changed, and that something was in the file I'd brought with me, copies of the cabin's deed updated 3 years ago. What Claire never realized was that in year 10 of our marriage, I'd bought out her portion of the property using personal funds from a private account my aunt helped me set up. We'd signed the paperwork at a notary, routine stuff. And Claire. She never paid attention to details that didn't serve her. She had assumed we still co-owned the cabin. She assumed wrong. I faxed the updated deed to the realtor, included a note. The only authorized seller of this property is Leon S. Brooks. Any attempt to proceed without proper title clearance will result in legal action. The auction canceled. But I wasn't done. I drove back down the mountain that night and visited my attorney first thing Monday morning, told him everything: the forged signature, the fake consent, the attempt to liquidate private property without ownership. His response: "You want to press charges?" I looked at him for a moment, then shook my head. "No," I said. "I want a cease and desist order, and I want her to feel it." We filed that morning. Within 48 hours, Claire received a formal legal warning, not from me, but from the State Bar Association's compliance officer. Forgery wasn't just unethical, it was criminal, and now she was under investigation. The next time I heard Claire's voice, it wasn't through a call or letter. It was a voicemail left in a rushed whisper. "I didn't mean to. I just thought I was entitled to something. You think you're better than me now? Leon. Is that it?" I didn't answer. Didn't need to. The system was already answering for me. Here's the thing about people like Claire. They don't understand boundaries until those boundaries rise like walls around them. She had spent years thinking she could charm her way through consequences, that her betrayal was some sort of entitlement, like being unhappy in a marriage gave her moral clearance to do what she wanted. But what she hadn't expected was that I had prepared for this long before she ever booked her first retreat. And to the men watching this now, sometimes the best way to win is not to chase the thief. It's to own the vault before they ever show up. His voice caught me off guard. I was slicing oranges in the kitchen, something quiet, something routine, when the phone rang. Unknown number. Out of instinct, I almost let it go to voicemail, but I answered. And for a second, I didn't recognize the voice on the other end. Low, hesitant, but not unfamiliar. "Mr. Brooks." I paused, knife in midair. "Speaking. It's Daniel." Daniel, Claire's retreat companion. The man in the photo with the wine glass and the sunset smile. I didn't say a word, just listened. He cleared his throat like someone standing too close to a cliff edge. I wasn't going to call, but I think you should know what's happening." There was something brittle in his tone, like shame or panic, maybe both. "Claire said you were fine with the money, that she'd already talked to you, that it was mutual." I stayed silent. He continued, stumbling. "But last week she tried to get me to sign over power of attorney so she could invest a portion of it. Your inheritance into a crypto startup her friend was running. She said it'd be temporary, just on paper. She'd move it back after. Said you'd never find out." I still didn't speak. He rushed on. I didn't sign it. Something didn't feel right. And then today I saw an email on her laptop from the Bar Association. It was about an investigation. "Look, man, I didn't know. I swear I didn't. I thought she was just in a bad place." Daniel sounded like a man unraveling at the seams. His voice cracked again. "She's not who I thought she was. That made two of us, but only one of us had married her." I finally spoke. "Why are you telling me this?" He was quiet for a beat. Then, "Because I think she's planning to disappear." My fingers curled slightly around the edge of the counter. Disappear. She mentioned Belize, something about a contact with dual citizenship. Said she had a clean exit plan. I think she's planning to move the money offshore. And she's been pulling cash in chunks. I don't know how much. You deserve to know. I thanked him, calmly, told him I appreciated the honesty. He asked if I was going to do something. I said I already had. Because what Daniel didn't know, and Claire certainly didn't, was that the inheritance wasn't just protected. It was insured, monitored, and tracked. 2 months before Claire's retreat, I'd moved the full sum into a tiered portfolio with fraud protection, daily alerts, and a forensic accounting clause through my financial advisor. I'd also set up something called a revocable living trust, giving me full legal oversight over any attempted movement outside my named beneficiaries, meaning every single attempt Claire made to access those funds was recorded, flagged, audited, and the best part, her crypto scam attempt. It triggered a federal inquiry because the startup she tried to funnel money into had already been on a watch list for international laundering. That forged signature now had context. The next letter I received wasn't from Claire. It was from the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation. They thanked me for providing early documentation, told me Claire's actions were being escalated for review. I didn't smile. Not yet. But something inside me settled. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from revenge, but from alignment. Here's the twist. Daniel didn't expect. He tried to warn me like a man who had just realized he boarded the wrong train. But I wasn't on the tracks anymore. I was in the control tower. To the men watching this, when someone shows you who they are, pay attention. But when they try to erase your history, make sure they don't know what you've already written in invisible ink. It was a Tuesday morning, overcast, the kind of gray that sits low in the sky and makes coffee taste stronger. I was trimming the hedges in front of the house when the phone rang. I recognized the number. Claire. 12 missed calls in the past week, all ignored. But this time I picked up. Hello? There was a pause. Then her voice soft and cracked around the edges. Why didn't you tell me I said nothing? You knew the whole time, didn't you? Still silence. She exhaled sharply. They've frozen my accounts. All of them. I got a letter from the Treasury Department and a subpoena. Daniel left, took his things and vanished. I waited. I don't understand. How did you know? That's when I finally spoke. Claire, you emailed me. Remember? What does that have to do with you sent that picture? The one with you and him wine in hand. I paused. I printed it out. Framed it actually. Kept it in my office. What that photo was the last piece I needed. Proof of your intent. The timestamp, the location, metadata, the wording in your email. It tied everything together. She gasped. You set me up. No, I said quietly. You set yourself up. I just stopped getting in the way. I didn't raise my voice, didn't curse, didn't even sound angry. I simply told her the truth, the trust, the safeguards, the legal team, that every financial transfer she attempted had been flagged before she even pressed send, that by the time she moved the money I'd already moved the goalposts, and that the inheritance had never been hers to begin with. You're punishing me, she whispered. No, I replied. I'm letting you face what you chose. I was scared, she said. I thought you'd hoard everything. I wanted to start over. You did start over, I said. Just not the way you planned. They're saying I could face charges. Financial misconduct. Fraud. There was a pause. I don't want to go to prison. That's between you and the law. Please, just talk to them. Tell them I made a mistake, that it was a misunderstanding. I stood still, hedge clippers in hand. Claire, if I do that, if I intervene, who will speak for the woman who worked 30 years as a nurse so I could have a future? She didn't reply. Who speaks for the boy she raised after my parents died? The one who promised her he'd protect her gift? Still nothing. That silence told me everything. I ended the call without another word, and I haven't heard from her since. 2 months later, I received the final paperwork. Her attempts to claim joint ownership over the inheritance had been officially rejected. My living trust held firm. Her accounts remained frozen. The crypto startup she backed dissolved and under investigation. And Daniel, last I heard, he'd left the country with none of the money she promised. There's a bench outside my aunt's old house, the one I inherited. Sometimes I sit there in the evening after the sun drops behind the hills, and I think about the quiet ways life teaches us who people really are. Thank you for walking this road with me. If you've ever been betrayed quietly, if you've ever watched someone walk away with what was yours, I hope this story reminded you that dignity can be reclaimed. Drop your city in the comments. Like this video if you've ever healed in silence. Subscribe because the next story might be yours. And remember, the calmest man in the room is often the one who's already won.